In this video, we're going to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's a topic I've been wanting to cover for quite a while now, so I'm excited about it. So let's not waste any time and get right to it. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams and the host of HR Shop Talk. This is a show where you get expert insight into all things HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show by clicking on the button at the bottom of the screen or subscribe to the podcast to keep learning from my smart and experienced. Today's guest is Marcie Hawranik. Marcie is the president of Canadian Equality Consulting, and I met her during some training that I did and she led a while back. She's certainly a leader in the field. She's won awards for her work on gender and presented to and worked with the UN on human rights. And I'm really glad to have her. Hi, Marcie, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm great. How are you doing?
I am good. And I'm looking forward to this. Might have been like the number one thing on my list for a while.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. So to get us going, can you summarize what EDI is, EDI being equity, diversity, and inclusion, and why organizations should invest in it?
It's a great question to get us started. And we often hear about the acronym EDI. Sometimes folks use DEI, often just depending on where you are in the world and what sector you work in. But as you mentioned, EDI is equity, diversity, and inclusion. And there are three distinct and very important concepts towards advancing equality. So the E, equity, really recognizes that people are different, are diverse, and have unique needs, and that it's so important to tailor our work and our approaches to meet their needs to help everyone be successful. We often like to think that if we treat people exactly the same, we're being fair, but equity is really recognizing the diverse needs and different needs that people have and tailoring your approaches to help them in order to be fair. The D is diversity, and diversity often includes kind of two aspects: diversity of thought and diversity of identity. And diversity of identity is usually what we focus on in EDI work because different backgrounds and demographics have different perspectives and experiences in life, and that will bring you that diversity of thought. And diversity is really all-encompassing. It's very broad. It can include the four traditional employment equity groups, but also goes much, much beyond that. And then I, lastly, is inclusion. And inclusion is really about creating a culture and a sense of belonging and value at an organization. So often we talk about diversity as being a seat at the table. Equity is sort of the decision-making rules and policies and procedures at that organization. And then inclusion is the culture or the norm that everyone belongs, is valued, and respected. And why should organizations invest in it? There's typically three main arguments that can be made for this. One is that EDI is a business imperative. We often hear about the business case of EDI, which has been well documented and well studied about investing in EDI results in increased profitability, engagement, creativity, empathy, lower turnover. And so essentially it makes really good business sense to invest and embed EDI in your work. And then there's also the moral or ethical case that it's simply the right thing to do and that it's in humanity's best interest to fix inequality and to help others with less advantages and less privileges than ourselves. And then there's always a personal case as well. So inequality in EDI work is extremely personal to people, and everyone is negatively impacted by inequality. No one benefits from it. So everyone that does some EDI learning and work and some critical self-reflection will be able to uncover their own personal case for advancing this work.
So single or straight white men.
So we often think that they're the winners in unequal systems, right? Because they're the most sort of dominant identity groups with the most power, kind of everywhere in the world, right? Right now. But when we focus on, but we always encourage an EDI to to look at the situation and the complexity of it, and how often these characteristics that are, traditionally masculine are more valued, and are given more power and rights in our society, which is 100% true. But then we also know that men have to fit within that hyper masculinized then characteristics. And then their mental health suffers, and violence rates increase, and heterosexual white men that experience more benefits than others. Yes. But at the end of the day, no one wins.
So you've just made the case for EDI, and I would dare say that it hasn't changed a lot. Maybe it's changing now, I don't know, but I would dare say it hasn't changed a lot in the last 20 years. So why is this still the case? Why are we still struggling with this? We've known for a long time it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so important to keep having this conversation, and often, and we've known it's the right thing to do, but the reason that companies are investing in it has shifted over time. When I first started this work, the reason why companies were investing in it and explaining their investments to others in it was solely around the business case. Now it's shifted within the last couple of years, definitely within the last year and a half, to that ethical case, and that, this is just the right thing to do. And more of that personal case is also emerging, which is really interesting. But basically, like you mentioned, there hasn't been big shifts in the last 20 years either. So what we have been doing hasn't been working. And while there has been some progress made in addressing explicit discrimination, many inequalities remain persistent and pervasive across the country and across all indicators of success. And EDI used to be focused solely on, it seemed to be focused predominantly on diversity and on numbers of folks and quotas, that sort of thing. But now we're shifting, and there's more openness to actually talk about the root causes.
Does this include men? I mean, of course it includes men, but they've been advantaged predominantly. So how do you get men involved?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It definitely has to include men. I feel like everyone has a place at this table and has a role in addressing this issue and this problem. And it can't be up to one specific demographic to solve it on their own, for sure. Having them really step into the role as allies is really important, and to bring them in as early as possible.
So what does the evidence show actually works in increasing and improving EDI?
Often companies don't know where to start. So we see them begin with like a general unconscious bias training. That's kind of the big popular one. But then it doesn't do anything, or they aren't able to effectively track how it's changed or the impact that it's had. And there's been studies that have shown that an unconscious bias training on its own can actually create bias awareness in attendees, but only up until about a month, and then you revert to the way you were before. So it's much more effective to do kind of a baseline assessment of your organization first, and determine where your gaps are, where your needs are, and then tailor whatever strategy to meet those needs. And then always obviously create KPIs and monitor and evaluate, and recognize that it's a journey. So there's no quick fixes, but evidence-based initiatives that are tailored to your organization and your work, with those accountabilities and that broader organizational commitment, will help you make progress. And we often use this sort of 3-part framework. We call it normalize, organize, and operationalize. So in order for your strategies or your initiatives to be successful, you have to start normalizing these topics and these conversations and these concepts with folks. Also talk about the organizational expectations around them and commitment to it. And then organize. So start with some learning that's tailored to your needs. Try to embed this in your values and your strategy and frameworks. And then you can start operationalizing it in introducing things like equity tools, as an example. And then at every stage, it's so important that it's important to have leadership buy-in and demonstrated commitment, for sure. But along the way, it has to involve kind of co-creation with those employees that will be most impacted or that are most marginalized, and to center their lived experiences in every step, because the principle of nothing about you without you is really crucial to all EDI work.
When you have seen HR departments, or maybe it's not HR, but someone in an organization who are effectively tackling EDI, what were they doing?
Yeah. I was trying to think about that question, and I think HR plays a really important role in EDI work. When I think of some examples of HR leaders and HR departments that are really doing a fantastic job, is that they're really there to sort of support the initiatives and provide some accountability and some framing for it, but that then they sort of step back and make sure that the organization and all employees know that this is their responsibility to do as well, so it doesn't become siloed. So I often say, like, it needs to begin with that sort of CEO and executive leaders championing and demonstrating a clear commitment to it and to set that tone. And then that accountability needs to be built around it. And then it definitely, for HR houses a lot of the really important data on employees that is crucial for any EDI work. And HR leads that data collection, can lead diversity censuses and assessments and that sort of thing. But what I've seen work really well is HR recruit and facilitate and create EDI committees with really diverse lived experiences and backgrounds of folks, and ensure that there's representation from all areas of the organization, and then co-create with those people this sort of EDI strategy and action plan with senior leaders too, but that HR is really there to help frame and support that committee and elevate the conversation when needed to senior leadership.
If you found this engaging, subscribe to see all the episodes and comment. What questions do you still have about EDI? Let us know in the comment section below. And back to you, Marcie. So what are some of the most common barriers you encounter to EDI in the workplace? And how do you recommend they get addressed?
Yeah, so there's a lot of common barriers and challenges. I was trying to think of a succinct way to explain them.
Your best.
Yeah. One is sort of, I think I've kind of threaded it in other questions too, is around sort of introducing EDI or trying to advance EDI, but not having a lack of accountability around it. So some organizations introduce and lead it, but they don't create KPIs around it. They don't monitor and evaluate it. And there isn't a clear timeline or lead to who's going to do what. Another kind of challenge is this one's a little more vague, but kind of an openness and willingness to change. So many organizations can feel threatened, or so many people within organizations, some folks can feel threatened by EDI work, whether it's the fear of change, whether it's sort of, this is the way we've always just done things here, or if it's a fear of, or thinking that they may not have a place in this. If they're part of a dominant group, they can feel excluded or left out. But that's something that is really common. We see a lot of, and the willingness to change, the fear about change, with this is the way we've always done things here. To mitigate that one, I'd recommend is just that initial sort of leadership buy-in, demonstrated commitment, clear communications around that this is what we're going to do and we're committed to this can help. But then on the other hand, the fear of being left behind or threatened in some way by this work is really important to apply sort of change management principles to this work as well. Right. And keeping things really transparent and really clear, and how this and how everyone will benefit from this, how everyone will be involved and can participate in this journey as well. And then also, I think another key barrier, which is really common, is a lot of organizations don't take intersectional approaches. So what I mean by that is they often like to start by focusing on only one group. And prioritizing that and aligning all their initiatives with that. And because it's overwhelming to tackle more than one at one time. But what we always try to encourage folks to do and help equip them to do is to take this intersectional approach, because no one group is a monolith. If an organization wants to lead with women, or focusing just on women as an example, you're not fully able to then understand the complexity of the challenges that women face, because women aren't a monolith. Women of color will have a very different experience than LGBTQ women or Indigenous women in your organization. So really like digging deeper and layering those identities to fully understand. And sometimes this can be overwhelming, but sometimes it can be empowering also, and like an exciting opportunity that you can do more than one at a time.
In terms of a structure for success, like what have you seen that works?
We often talk about, to be really successful, there's kind of 5 key ingredients of success, and you don't have to have all of them. No organization usually has them right at the start. But as you start and go down this journey, you can build different aspects of them, and you can focus certain initiatives on certain pieces and help advance that way. And the first one is that leadership commitment and buy-in. So often, for instance, when we do assessments, we start with a leadership alignment session and sort of teach them first and have them really understand this at a deeper level. And then demonstrate that for the rest of the organization. And then another key aspect is that organizational culture, sort of writ large. So trying to communicate that this is everyone's responsibility. And then the third key ingredient is community, co-creation, and collaboration. So again, just involve those that would be impacted the most, let them have a say in it. This could be if you have ERGs or employee resource groups, make sure you consult with them, bring them in to get their feedback. And then the fourth one is about technical capacity. So ensuring that the folks that you have leading this work internally have the support and the skills and training and everything that they need, and to help set them up for success. And then the last one is around ownership and accountability. So just making sure that there's clear timelines, there's ongoing evaluation, and then also reporting.
So final question here. So there's a ton of information out there on EDI. And this, I mean, especially in the last few years, it seems like it's exploded. If someone wants good information, do you have a recommendation as to where they should go for that?
For sure. Yeah, it's really exciting to see over the last year and a half how this EDI conversations have been really infiltrating like mainstream dialogue and kitchen table conversations. So there's a ton of resources on social media. Take with them what you will, take a little grain of salt with them, look at a variety of different sources to try to balance it out if you can, to get a deeper understanding. But a couple places you could go are on our website. We have a really healthy blog where we try to write about really topical current events. And we also include equity tools in there and different infographics to help you learn and share as well. We also have a podcast. We'll have to have you on our podcast, Andrea. And it's called Exclusion. And
I will put a link to that.
Awesome.
Notes of this.
And then otherwise, I'd say I'm available. So contact me anytime. I'd love to answer your questions, and I'll follow and look at the comments on the video too, and can type in different things. And if there's specific topics anyone's interested in, I'm happy to give more tailored resources as well.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Thanks, Marcie. I learned quite a bit during that conversation, and I'm glad we were finally able to have it, and I was able to get this episode done. Seems like a victory. You may be interested in an episode on coaching, which is another way of transforming an organization and could even help with EDI, I imagine. Check that out here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.